let's get to Kris. I have Kris, who is in our queue right now. Kris, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Kris in Michigan. How are you doing?
Okay. Yeah, I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. Welcome to the show. What can we talk to you about?
Well, I'm a friend of Kelly's, and I saw where he'd posted that he's looking for stories, and I have a ghost story for you.
Yes. Kelly doing the work today. Shout outs to Kelly Laughlin, who got a comment of the day today, and he's got a caller for us. So thank you, Kelly. Kris, tell us your ghost story.
Okay. I understand everybody on this channel is pretty much atheists.
Yes.
And so I believe you don't believe in ghosts. Is that correct?
Neither Jmike. I can't speak for Jmike, actually. Jmike, do you believe in ghosts?
I do not. I mean, atheism doesn't entail that like you couldn't believe in ghosts. You could. I mean, there's like people like Michael Humer, who's a professor but he believes in souls. So there's but I don't believe in ghosts. So no,
neither of us believe in ghosts. Yeah, bottom line.
Yeah, okay, we won't go into that and why I have issues with that, but yeah.
That's my favorite topic.
No, actually, we would love that. Actually, that's also a legitimate conversation on this show. So don't feel like you can't talk about that.
We'll do that afterwards. Let me tell you my stories.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay, I don't want to waste your time like some of the other people on here, so I'm going to tell you this story started way back in the 60s. My brother was probably about 10, which made me about 5, give or take a few years. Anyway, it was back in the 60s. We were struggling, money was tight, electric was expensive. So my father was very upset when any light was left on, and he got mad because my brother left the garage light, which unattached garage back on a farm. He left the light on. He says, "Get out there and shut it off." So my brother ran out there, and all of a sudden he came running back in, hysterical. He's like, oh my God, there's something in the garage. And my parents are kind of like laughing, like, what, a raccoon? He said, no, it was all humpy. It was all humped over. It was a guy. It was all humped over. And they're laughing. My dad goes out there. He comes back in. They're laughing at him. So my parents started joking around that he must have seen a ghost, and they nicknamed him Humpy. Okay.
Cool.
So many years later, my brother never talked about it again. I'm 15 years old. I'm with a best friend. We're sitting up late at night, and we're drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes at the kitchen table. And we're writing a story about different events that had recently happened, because we want to be publishers. All of a sudden, we heard kind of just a little creak, just a little noise. We both looked over from the actually dining room table, but it's open concept. And the door below the sink was just slightly ajar, about 2 inches, and out came, and it looked basically like fog or smoke, but you could definitely see features. It was hunched over, and it went from the sink into where the pantry was. We both looked at each other and said, did you see what I saw? I don't know. What did you see? We both started describing it to each other. We both saw the exact same thing. It was an old man, hunched over, looked almost like a pirate because he had knickers on.
Okay. You had a pirate in your house?
Yeah. Well, no, he looked like a pirate because he had knickers on. He had short pants. Okay, so didn't think about it, nothing. About a year later, I'm at home. My parents are out on vacation. I'm minding the house, and I was talking to my friend. I talked to her like 6 times that night, and I had just hung up, and all of a sudden I see out of the corner of my eye from one bedroom to the other, because it was like a hallway off the living room.
Mm-hmm.
Go from one bedroom to the other, the same hunched over man in knickers. I'm home alone. I'm way out in the country. This was back when you didn't have area codes, let alone the prefix. You just dialed the 4 digits and it was a party line. So I called my friend and the mother answers and says, no, you can't talk to her again. So I'm hysterical. I stayed up the rest of the night. No other incidents.
Interesting.
Okay, so that was, okay, so about 2 more years go by.
Yeah.
2-3 more years. My brother brings home a friend from the service. He's in the service. He brings a guy home for a holiday. He didn't have any place, any family to go to. So, come on home with me on leave.
Okay.
Well, he got up in the morning. My mother she was a fabulous cook, made huge breakfast always. It was always important. My dad always said the best meal of the day is your breakfast. We couldn't go hunting. We couldn't do anything unless you ate your breakfast. Anyway, so my mom's got this big breakfast on the table, and Rex, his name was, Rex Rose. And he came out of the bedroom, and he says, I had the weirdest dream. And we're like, okay, what? He said, I had this dream. I thought I woke up, but I couldn't have been awake because I saw the bottom drawer of the dresser open up, and this guy in knickers got up and walked out and walked into the closet. And of course, we all burst out laughing. It's Humpy.
Oh, so this is interesting. So you have multiple accounts from independent parties who claim to have seen a very similar phenomenon.
Same descriptions exactly. Over multiple years. Even my brother to this day, we wonder, when did Humpy leave, or did we just quit seeing him?
So, Kris, let me ask you this. On a scale from 0 to 100, how confident are you, 0 being not confident at all, 100 being absolutely can't change my mind on this, confident that what you experienced was a ghost?
10,000.
10,000. That's pretty high.
Without a doubt. Like I said, it wasn't just me. It wasn't just my brother. There were other people involved.
That's pretty interesting. Jmike, what do you think?
It's really hard for me to challenge people's personal experiences. I'm not there to investigate any of that. So I don't know. I don't know Kris. For all I know, well, just real quick. All I know is that real quick, Kris, because I don't know Kris. Kris could be lying. I have no idea. I don't think that you are. But that's a possibility. I have no idea. You could be telling the truth. You could have both seen something real and misidentified it. I'm not really sure how to proceed with investigating something that I wasn't a witness to. But the one thing I know I can kind of discuss with is theism and atheism and why I don't believe and why you possibly believe. But if someone says, look, I'm 100% convinced and there's no doubt, I don't know what I'm going to say that's going to change their mind. And I don't know if I have the place to even do that since
Let's talk about this then. So. I want to know, Kris, if you didn't have this experience, this personal experience, right, would you still believe that ghosts were real? Or would you be more skeptical? Hello, Kris, you there?
Yeah.
Oop, Kris, I think you said something. Can't quite hear you. There you go. Okay.
I said that happened so long ago that at this point in my life, I could not answer that.
Okay.
It happened, and so therefore I have been a believer forever since I was 50 years old, which was 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, not
that's a very spooky story. And if I had a personal experience in which I shared with you, which I couldn't identify what I was experiencing in any other terms other than this is a ghost, Yeah, I could see how that would be hard to describe to other people. What stops me from being a believer in ghosts? One, to be totally clear, I've never had a paranormal experience like in my life, really, honestly, never really had it. So I can't speak to personal experience, but like conceptually, it's really hard for me to understand what a ghost like even is. So, for example, you talked about like you could see that this ghost had like human features, and had like something that you could identify as being like an older person with like knickers on. I think that's really interesting. But like in order for us to like see things, right, we have to like have photons bounce off of stuff, go into our eyes, right? You know, that if they're moving stuff, that, you know, presumably there's some sort of physical force happening. In other words, I don't know where like the physical realm and the spiritual realm sort of meet in that point of view, right? It seems like if it's interacting with the physical world in some way, it actually has to be a physical phenomenon. Otherwise, how am I even able to see it in the first place? Or like, is the ghost like, you know, Earth is moving in space, right? Is the ghost affected by gravity? Is it like, you know, attached to the Earth somehow? Like, or is it, would it be flying out? You know, there's a lot of questions that I would have about that.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, because you just kind of keep talking, and I want to just tell you, yes, I believe that, you know, the other dimension is time, and maybe that person was trapped in time. I don't know, but I can tell you that when my parents, well, actually, my grandmother purchased the property. It was bought from an old hermit that had just a shack on the property, and don't know what happened to him. Don't know the story behind. Don't know if he was dead then, whatever. But that's the story, that my grandmother purchased it from an old, you know, that an old hermit had a shack on the property on the 80 acres. And who knows? It could have been him. I don't know.
Yeah. Jmike, further thoughts? What do you think?
I mean, I'd echo your sentiments. I mean, I've never had an experience like that myself. I think death is permanent. And that's just going to come from my background. It's impossible for me to investigate what you experienced, but the one thing that one thing I'm iffy on is your confidence level in the belief, being so high, because it seems like you think you've exhausted like all these other candidate possible explanations. But like, I would just ask you, like, what kind of like independent work did you do or could you have done to try to verify?
I was 15 years old.
You were how old were you?
15. I was 15 years old.
15. Yeah, I mean,
about anything.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
I mean, you're not exactly.
Fair. Yeah, I mean, I can't really challenge you on. I mean, I didn't really realize it was that young, but I mean, to me, that just throws things further into question that you have a developing mind.
Well,
you don't
like
really fully know how the world works, and then you go back and your memory starts to fill in a bunch of stuff over time. I mean,
no. Okay, no, you're talking out of your blowhole. No,
okay,
it's something so significant. It's something so significant that it makes such an imprint that you never ever forget.
But that's isn't that? But Kris, isn't that consistent with misidentifying something, right? Isn't that consistent with thinking? So wait, hold on. You're saying that if I had an experience of a ghost and I was wrong, you're saying it still couldn't change my life and transform my life? Of course it could. My ignorance of thinking that it's a ghost when it's not would transform my life no more or less if it was actually a ghost, right?
Okay, it wouldn't have been that significant and that many.
It would have been, because it's what you think is true. It's not there's an open question about whether or not it's actually true. Your view is just that you have an attitude that it is true. And I'm not trying to dismiss your experience. I've tried to walk over. Please let me finish. Please let me finish. I've tried to actually walk over that as respectfully as I can. So I really don't appreciate your comments. I'm trying to explain to you that if your epistemology or how you know things is so low to the point where you think significance equals that it's more likely to be true, that's just false, right? I mean, I can think something is true and it have immense amount of significance to me, and I can just be wrong. There's a lot of people, I call them Christians, right? There's a lot of people that have significant events that happen in their life. And in my opinion, they're just wrong, right? So I don't see like this isn't, and you would say the same thing about a Muslim or anybody else, that they have significant experiences, but they're not having experiences from Allah, right? So, I mean, it just seems like you would already agree with me that significance here does nothing to establish whether or not it's true or false.
I understand where you're coming from. And like I said, my brother and I have discussed this with our experiences over the years. And there is no doubt in either one of our minds of what we both, and he did not describe to me until much, much later. All he described it was somebody humpy. Well, he was hunched over, almost like, you know, he was walking on a cane or something. That's why talking to these people that experienced it, that made it more concrete, more whether like it's believable, because we all experienced the same thing at different points, saw the same thing.
Do you think it's possible? Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you, but do you think it's possible, like if we're talking about phenomenon like what you experience, could that be recorded in other ways besides people interacting with it? For example, do you think it's possible that a ghost could be caught on camera or something to that effect?
Not a camera with good quality, evidently.
Well, yeah, sure. But do you think there's other ways?
Actually, it's just that ghosts are blurry. It's like Bigfoot. It's like they're just blurry.
Yeah,
right? Bigfoot is blurry. That's the problem, right?
Yeah,
like,
he's just a blurry guy. But also, like, I'm just like curious as to your worldview as the ghosts are concerned, right? Do you think that they could be captured in other ways besides the human experience?
Okay, I know there's a lot of shows out there. I don't believe any of them. I really don't.
Okay.
I believe there's something that probably could, but I couldn't tell you what it is. But as far as these ghost shows on TV and this and that, I call most of them 99.9% false.
I'd say 100%, because why would we have a new season of a ghost show if we never act like welcome back to season 52 of Never Finding a Ghost. We'll be right back with season 52 of Never Finding a Ghost.
Yeah, but so Kris, do you think a ghost could potentially be caught on camera? Do you think?
Truly, I don't think so. Not the cameras that we have now.
Okay. So why do you think human beings are able to see ghosts but not cameras?
Because they come into our time. They come into our realm and they allow us to glimpse them. But as far as anything mechanical, I don't think so.
No.
I don't know why I feel that way.
Okay.
But I just do.
I'm just curious.
I can also, tell you that animals are more sensitive. Mm-hmm. Children are more sensitive.
What?
I can also tell you, I'm not going to go into the story, but
wait, how do you? Hold on, I'm sorry. How do you know that?
That is a good question. How do we know that children are more sensitive?
I hear people. I know, but I hear people say this. Like, I just watched like a TikTok video of this like mom who was like filming her son talking to somebody in a room, and she's like, "Oh, they can detect." No, he's a kid. He's a kid.
Yeah,
he has an underdeveloped brain. His brain isn't developed. What are you talking about? That requires demonstration. Like, I can't sit back and have someone like, "Oh, they know this because dogs sense it." No, they don't. Prove it. That's an empirical claim.
You have to admit, when you're younger, you learn most of your stuff. I'm going to go on a limb here. By the time you're 10, I mean, yes, there is other college and academics and this and that, but so much instinct and survival experiences. And how can a 2-year-old all of a sudden be playing Beethoven?
I don't think 2-year-olds play Beethoven. What do you mean?
Well, I think she's talking like
never met a 2-year-old that has played Beethoven. Kris, have you met 2-year-olds playing Beethoven?
Maybe there might be a savant out there. You never know.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name, but yeah, there is. If you Google it, maybe he was 4. But
I'm sorry. I don't mean to be facetious, but I really don't know what the point of that is. Right? Okay, a 2-year-old can play Beethoven. What does it have to do with seeing ghosts? You know.
Reincarnation.
How do you know that?
What?
How do you know reincarnation's a thing?
I'm a total believer in reincarnation. I don't think
I get that's what you believe, but why? Like,
yeah,
what gives you reason to think that that's true?
Well, like I said, if you Google child prodigies,
so
I Google child prodigy, I'm gonna.
Kris, could it be possible that can child prodigies exist? Kris, real quick, I'm so sorry. I don't mean there's a little bit of a delay between the call, so I know it kind of makes it a little difficult to have a conversation, and I apologize for that. There's not really a whole lot we can do. But can child prodigies exist and also reincarnation not be real? Like, is that a possibility?
I don't think so.
Why not?
I don't think so, because you learn so much younger. The more you are, the more you absorb, the more you learn. Okay. And it's a learned instinct. So somebody that comes out that is so young, that hasn't been exposed to those things, that all of a sudden they can do, where did it come from?
Well, that's just an argument from ignorance. If you don't know where it come from, you don't slap the random like label of like supernatural or whatever, right? Like that. Like, I mean, because presumably I could just take the same form of reasoning and then for X substitute out anything I want for it. And why would that be justification? I don't get it.
Just do a quick Google search on 4-year-old. I don't know.
Like, I've talked to people's parents. They all think their kids are prodigies, and maybe they are, right? No. So it's fine. Like I think Dan's question was what needs to be answered, or at least what needs to be pointed out, is that there's nothing inconsistent with the conjunction of there's a child prodigy and like no supernatural stuff or no reincarnation like that. There's no like contradiction entailed by that. There's nothing there. So like when you say you don't think so, I'm just going to ask, why do you think that? I mean, if you just say, well, just do a quick Google search, like, I mean, what am I supposed to Google this? And then all of a sudden it's like irrefutable. I'm going to have to accept reincarnation, because I've had these debates for a long time and I've done a lot of Googling on it. And I've never once thought, oh, those words on a page now make me think it's true. Like,
okay. He's a 4-year-old kid playing Beethoven. I'm trying to get his name.
I'm assuming he can, like, you know, whether it's he hears it and maybe he has a very good understanding of the piano keys, or he's reading sheet music, you know, regardless, like, what does this have to do with reincarnation? That's what we're getting at, right? A 4-year-old is really good at playing the piano. Why does that mean that he's reincarnated? Why can't he just be really good at playing the piano?
Well, that's a good point. But what I believe, it's not just he learned it in 4 years. His name is Johann.
No, we're granting that it's a thing. That's fine. But if you say that's a good point that Dan just made, then what else is there for you to think, right? What weighs that out? You have the scale and you're like, okay, that's a good point, Dan. It's weighing out the scales a little bit where I can see your view. What makes yours go up a little bit more? Like, why do you think that's, I don't understanding. Like, why do you think, if that's a good point, like what's missing in Dan's kind of analysis that has to be added to this, the thing that you think is true?
Well, if you look, Johann George Cutty, Yohann George.
I'm fine. I'm granted. Yeah, I grant it. We have a really smart child who play piano. Great. Why is that reincarnation? Who was he reincarnated from? How could we tell? What methodology could we use to show?
For example,
could we falsify it? Right? These are all questions that need to be answered.
Yeah, let's use a different example, right? Let's say I believe I'm looking at this kid, right, Kris, and I'm saying, you know what? That is evidence that aliens are beaming knowledge into children, right, and giving them those powers. Okay, could be. What makes reincarnation more likely, or is it more likely? Can we evaluate whether one is more likely than the other?
You know, it's just it is my belief.
Sure.
I'm not against that there's alien influence in things. I think all things are possible. If you can imagine it, it can happen. We only use about 10% of our brain. And if we could prove everything, I don't think we'd want that knowledge.
Maybe not, but I do think that there are some things we can prove, or at least some things we can demonstrate, right? Like you're right. We live in a world where we're limited. We're limited beings. We have to rely on other people for knowledge. We have to rely on all sorts of systems and mechanisms in order for us to get along with our day, right? Because that's just how we operate. Yeah. So I want to try to believe in what's most reliable, what's going to reliably demonstrate for me to be true, right? Like I think if I study physics, I think I'm going to be able to understand the principles of how a car works, because I think that's the output that a knowledge of physics could get me, right? But when it comes to beliefs about reincarnation or aliens beaming into children and giving us powers, right? Maybe there are ways we could look at empirically how that might work, and maybe we haven't found any yet. Or if we haven't, it makes me wonder, why should I have one belief and value that more than another? Why can't I just say I don't know? Or maybe there isn't a reason, right?
Okay.
Because as soon as I pick a reason, as soon as I say, oh, it's reincarnation, then what's the point, right? How do we understand what is true anymore? Sorry, I'm going on a little bit of a talk there. Go ahead.
Okay, couple things there. First of all, my brother is total physics geek. Okay?
Yeah.
We're not even going to go into that. Okay, second point. Okay, what you were talking something about knowing everything, proving everything. I think someday we will reach that level of being able to prove.
Sorry, Kris, I don't mean to interrupt you. That wasn't exactly what I was saying. It was more just like, look, I have limited time on my hands, right? I can't go out and prove everything. I can't go and prove, that nuclear, I don't know. I was going to make some weird analogy there, but we don't even have to go that far. There's a lot of things I don't know about how the world works. I have to rely on methods or rely on experts who are using methods to know how things work, right? So if we don't have a good method of knowing why young kids have good skills, why should we choose one belief over another? Like, why should we choose reincarnation over maybe a kid just has a brain that's wired differently, right? Because I'm more willing to believe in the kid being wired differently, because I think that there's at least some empirical evidence for that, right? I think there's some ways we can get to that.
And it would be strange when you live in a world where there are all of these statistical probabilities, and some of those statistic probabilities are they're improbable. They're not likely to occur, right?
Yeah.
And what would be really strange in the world is if you didn't find those improbabilities occurring at the rate they do, or if you never find them at all, right? And so it's expected upon, my opinion, a naturalistic hypothesis, that you would find, very rarely, but you would find them, these 2-year-olds with some cognitive ability to understand whatever, or play whatever, or the ability to do whatever. You're expected to find that. And it would be a miracle, or to me, it'd be like evidence of something supernatural if we never had anything like that. Or if these improbabilities all of a sudden randomly just started happening all the time, right? That'd be a cause for concern for me. But just pointing out hey, there's this improbable event, that is entirely consistent with just a naturalistic worldview. That's like, in fact, that's the expectation upon the hypothesis.
Hold on. Okay. I know you got a podcast here and you're paid to talk, but before
we're not paid any money. So I don't know what you're talking about. I do this for fun. I do this for free.
Yeah, okay. Just FYI.
Whatever. Okay. Whatever. Okay. Let me ask you this question. Do you believe in love?
Sure.
Yeah. I believe in love.
Okay.
Do you
really? Does your mother love you?
Yeah.
Yes.
How do you know that?
Because I have background information on what's indicative of human love and what's consistent and inconsistent with that. And that's going to be like even further narrowed down with certain people.
In other words, she raised me, she fed me, she clothed me, she bathed me, she did all the things that a loving mother
would. She didn't throw me off a building and get rid of me. You know, it's pretty easy to decipher.
That is your concept of love?
That's just it's partial.
Well, part of it, yeah. It's one aspect of it.
If you thought we just would exhaust love in 15 seconds, then you got some thinking to do yourself.
You're both single, aren't you?
No, I live with my girlfriend actually.
I don't know why my personal life matters to your. I don't know why my personal life matters to your unsubstantiated claims.
Do you love her? This is a
do.
point. This is a good point of discussion.
Let her cook, Jmike. Let her cook. I do love my girlfriend.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. How do you know you love her?
How do I know I love her? Well, I feel differently about her than I do other people. And I do things for her that I wouldn't do for other people.
Okay, so can that be analyzed scientifically and proven?
Yes.
100%.
How?
We know the chemical compounds.
Well, because you can analyze my life, right? What is empiricism? Empiricism is scientifically, right? It's making observations, right? And coming up with hypotheses about what you would expect if a certain condition's met, right? Yeah. So listen to this, Kris. Listen to this. If you expected that I loved my girlfriend, what would you expect? What's your hypothesis? What would you expect to see? If it was true that I love my girlfriend.
I would hope you would love her unconditional and do anything, even risk your life for her.
Okay. So if I did those things, if I risked my life for her one time and I showed that I was loving her unconditionally, would you believe that I loved her? If I did those things? Okay. That's a scientific understanding of love. You're taking observations and you have a hypothesis and you match up with that hypothesis. That's the method in action.
And it's the same thing with reincarnation.
But that's literally what I just challenged. I literally said what was expected on the naturalistic hypothesis is this.
Let's think about this. If it was true that reincarnation was real, wouldn't we have way more kids that could do instruments? How many people can play instruments, right? Millions of people. Why aren't more 4-year-olds playing instruments?
Especially if that's the criteria that's sufficient for you to believe in reincarnation is like little kids playing instruments very well or something.
Not everybody chooses to be reincarnated.
Oh,
there's a choice involved.
It's extra here. So how many musicians do you think are reincarnated?
What did you go? I'm just curious. I'm sorry, Dan. Not everyone chooses. Did you watch the deliberation process after like people's death? Like, I'm sorry, but like the amount of hubris that you have on this view is kind of annoying to me. I'm not gonna lie, because like look, I'm sure you're a nice guy. I'm sure you're a nice gal. You gave no pronouns. So I don't want to straw man your pronouns. So I'm sure you're a nice person, right? Real quick. I'm sure you're a nice person, right? And I'm Dan's being nice, but what I really don't appreciate is people like walking around with this head on their shoulder, like they know the fundamental nature of reality. Do you know how arrogant that is? Do you know how absolutely arrogant that is, that you think you figured out the secret of life? That's what you think. You think you figured out the secret of life. That is so much hubris. And you haven't even given any justification for it. You've just talked about what you believe the whole time. That's it. That's all you've done.
No, I have not figured out all of life. but I know what makes me happy.
You know the secrets of it,
And
apparently.
Pardon?
You know the secrets to life, things that we can't peer behind. You were there and you watched people deliberate on whether or not they wanted to be a dung beetle or not, right?
Oh, that's so weird. I don't even know how to respond to that.
It's your view. You're the one who thinks that you know that people choose to be reincarnated. And the question is, in virtue of what do you know that to be true? It's a ridiculous claim. You should have never made it.
No, you're right. You're right. I should not have even brought that up here. It's my belief. We were talking about ghosts. That's where it came from. And I wanted you to tell me, how can science prove love if somebody loves? It's a feeling.
Feelings have chemical components, right? So like I take antidepressants and that affects my mood, right? That affects how I feel. That's a purely physical process, right? I'm taking a pill and it's affecting my body. And love, when people experience love, they release certain hormones, for example, right? You know, there's different chemical changings happening in the body, right?
Yes.
So I mean, that's open to science, is it not? That's open to empiricism. That's open to people, you know.
Everything is open to science.
Yeah. Well, not everything, but a lot of things. So yeah, I think science that, but you asked, your question was, how can love be analyzed by science? And that's my answer, right?
Okay. Well, okay, you brought up the science thing. You said almost everything. So what isn't? I challenge you. What isn't?
Oh, what isn't observable by science? Well, that's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Anything that can't be observed, right, isn't accessible by science. So for example, Kris, if you said that there is an invisible, can't be perceived, can't be analyzed being out in another dimension, that isn't accessible to ours whatsoever, right? That can't be analyzed by science, right? Because science only works with what we can see and what we can observe and what we can perceive. So that's an example, like a hypothetical being outside of space and time, right? Some people say that's what God is, right? And if that's what God is, then he can't be open to science. So that's an example.
At this moment, we can't do those things. But you don't think in the future we could?
If we could, then it would be open to science. Yeah, because science, again, takes in what we observe, right? So
1890, do you think they would have been thought it even possible that you and I are talking right now on a cell phone?
Yeah, probably not. I mean, maybe some people, but like, yeah, but I think that what we're doing is open to science as well, right? Like,
okay, first of all, I want to tell you this joke. Yabbits live in the woods.
Okay, I don't know what that means.
Yabbits, rabbits, yabbits. So don't say yabbit, yabbit.
Are you correcting my speech right now?
Yeah, I was.
Oh, okay. Well, Kris, maybe I don't have English as my first language, or maybe I come from a part of the country that speaks differently. I don't know why you feel the need to correct the way that I talk, but honestly, I think we should probably wrap up this conversation.
It's because you got to watch your blow. You're just talking out your blowhole.
I guess so. So, Kris, it was genuinely interesting talking to you. I'm actually very glad that you called in. I'm glad Kelly convinced you to call in. I don't know what your relationship with Kelly is going to be like after this, but
I'm going to be reincarnated as a blowhole. That's what I learned from this conversation.
Yeah, but we are at the end of our show here, Kris. We do have to let you go, so I am going to go ahead and drop you here. But thanks so much for calling in, yeah, done with that conversation. Jmike,
I just find
reincarnation real.
I find beliefs. I get really more pissy at that stuff because I believed in reincarnation at one point, and
you were going off.
It's such an arrogant belief to have. It really is. Like, look,
you just got so mad.
Well, yeah, because look, if someone's like, well, why do you hold to naturalism and think that there's only naturalism? Well, I can only give you, I can give you justification, but I will always preface, this might not be convincing to you. I have my reasons, and it's usually just going to be a trade-off of comparing the data, which has less commitments and explains all the data. And I think naturalism always wins that battle of that comparing those theoretical virtues, simplicity versus explanation. And so I can give the justification. If someone is like, I believe in reincarnation, and they go, because I think it's a simpler hypothesis, explains all the data really well, and naturalism is committed to more, and it's unnecessarily, that would be good reason to justify. But it's not like you hear any, like some like kind of humble approach at it. It's like, no, I know that there's a choice between, someone. Why do you know that? How do you know that? It's like, did you ever once think, how do I know this? So I'm not going to claim my position as full proof. I'm just going to claim, look, I have justification for what I think is true.
As people, particularly Americans, I think it's a very American way of thinking. That might be just a bias on my part, but I feel like our culture in particular, we don't ask those kinds of questions, right? You get to have a belief, and it gets to be your unique, special belief. And if anybody questions that, you're a big meanie head, and it's your thing because nobody gets to touch it. But it's like there are some beliefs that are actually open to conversation, if not other methods of analysis, right? And like a reincarnation belief is totally like, I mean, not completely, but it is lookable by science in some way, right?
It's just this whole people choose to, like, that thing sets me off. It's like, what? Yeah. You were there, like, I don't have a problem with reincarnation. That part is just like, what are you talking about?
It's like, how do you know that they chose? Did they tell you that they chose?
Yeah.
Like what happens there? I didn't choose this life, Jmike. This life chose me. You know what I'm saying?
If we chose, there would be very few dung beetles. And since the world is full of a lot of beetles and a lot of really crappy things that people wouldn't choose, if it actually came down to choice, we could falsify this hypothesis, I think, or have a good case, because most people would just go, nah, I'm good. And there wouldn't be beetles and crazy.
If you're already an ant, you're probably like enjoying it though. Like you probably don't want more out of life, because then like desires come into it, right? If you're a different person, don't you have different desires? And your choices are going to be different. I don't know. The whole thing
screws me. Yeah, the whole thing screws me up.